Linda sat at the edge of the weathered kitchen table, her hands tightly clutching a mug of lukewarm coffee. The faded wallpaper behind her echoed the monotony of her days. Her gaze shifted to the newspaper sprawled in front of her, its job listings offering nothing new, nothing she hadn't already chased after in the past few months. "I just don't know what else to do," Linda sighed, her voice barely rising above the hum of the old refrigerator. "I've been applying everywhere, Ethan, but there's nothing left in this town since the factory shut down." Across the table, her teenage son Ethan looked up from his homework, his youthful energy starkly contrasting her weariness. "Mom, it's not your fault," he said gently. "The whole town's struggling. You've done everything you can." Linda forced a smile, but couldn't hide the anxiety simmering beneath her calm exterior. The meatpacking plant had been the lifeblood of their small town, employing generations of families. It had provided her with stability for 15 years, helping her raise Ethan and support her aging father, Grandpa Robert. But now, it was just another boarded-up building on the main road, a monument to what used to be. "It's more than that, Ethan," she murmured, her voice catching. "It's not just about finding a job. It's about holding everything together. Our home, your future, Grandpa's care. How can I do that if I can't even get my foot in the door?" Ethan closed his notebook and leaned forward, determination flickering in his young eyes. "We'll figure it out, Mom. We always do." Linda looked at him, her heart swelling with both pride and guilt. He shouldn't have to bear the weight of their struggles. But deep down, she knew Ethan's hope was the only thing keeping her from collapsing under the pressure. That evening, Linda sat on the worn couch in their modest living room, the television playing softly in the background. The screen's glow illuminated her tired features as Ethan entered, his phone in hand and a spark of excitement in his voice. "Mom, I found something," he exclaimed, holding his phone out to her. As she took the device, Linda's brows knitted together, squinting at the job listing. "A maid?" she asked, her tone both skeptical and exhausted. "Yes," Ethan nodded eagerly. "Look, it's in a wealthy neighborhood just an hour away. The job includes accommodation and decent pay. You wouldn't have to worry about rent anymore, and," he hesitated, gauging her reaction, "we could still visit Grandpa." Linda leaned back, her gaze drifting away from the phone. Her first instinct was to reject the idea. She had spent years in the factory, working hard to build a stable life for Ethan. Cleaning someone else's home felt like a step backward, a blow to her pride. "I don't know, Ethan," she murmured, shaking her head. "I've never done anything like this before. And what about you? What about school?" "It's summer now," he countered quickly. "We'll figure it out later. Maybe I can switch to homeschooling or attend a boarding school if needed." "Mom, we need this. It's a good opportunity." Linda's chest tightened. He was right, but leaving their only known life was daunting. Still, his suggestion had a practicality that she couldn't ignore. They had no savings left, and Grandpa Robert's nursing home fees piled up. "Okay," she whispered, more to herself than to Ethan, "but only for the summer. I'll take the job and see how it goes." Ethan grinned, relief washing over his face. "That's all I'm asking. Just try, Mom." The following days were a whirlwind of preparation. While Ethan arranged their move, Linda packed their modest belongings into a few suitcases. Before leaving, they visited Grandpa Robert one last time. He sat in his chair by the window, staring out into the distance, his frail hands resting on the armrests. "Grandpa," Linda said softly, kneeling beside him, "we're going to try something new. But we'll visit you often, I promise." The older man's glassy eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was a flicker of recognition. "Linda and Marcus," he murmured, his voice trembling. Linda froze. Marcus, the name of her baby brother, who had died shortly after birth. Tears welled up in her eyes as she kissed Grandpa's cheek. "It's just me, Grandpa," she whispered. "But I'll always be here for you." The sun was setting as Linda and Ethan arrived at the estate. The house was massive, sprawling with pristine white walls and large bay windows gleaming in the golden light. Linda couldn't help but feel out of place as she stepped out of the car, clutching her suitcase. They were greeted by Emily, the house manager, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s with a sharp gaze and a kind smile. "You must be Linda," she said, extending a hand. "And this is your son?" Ethan stepped forward confidently. "I'm Ethan. I can help with gardening or any small tasks you need." Emily raised an eyebrow, impressed by his assertiveness. "We'll see about that. Come on, let me show you around." The interior of the house was even more opulent than Linda had imagined. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and intricately carved furniture filled every room. Emily led them to their quarters, a spacious staff room with 2 beds and a small kitchenette. "This will be yours," Emily said. "It's simple but comfortable. The job isn't complicated either: cleaning, organizing, and light cooking. Don't worry if you've never done this before. I'll show you the ropes." Linda nodded, feeling both overwhelmed and grateful. "Thank you. I'll do my best." Emily smiled. "That's all I asked." As the days passed, Linda adjusted to her new role. The work was straightforward but physically demanding. She spent hours dusting antiques, scrubbing floors, and ensuring the house remained spotless. True to his word, Ethan helped the gardener and even ran errands for the cook. His enthusiasm and adaptability impressed everyone, including Emily. One morning, Linda found herself alone in the grand living room, polishing a coffee table, when she noticed a man standing in the doorway. He was tall, with dark hair slicked back, his sharp blue eyes assessing her with curiosity and faint amusement. He wore a tailored suit, but his relaxed posture suggested he was at ease in his surroundings. "You must be the new maid," he said, his tone teasing yet distant. "I'm Daniel. I believe I own this place." Linda straightened, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm Linda," she replied curtly, unsure how to address him. "Well, Linda," he said with a smirk, "welcome to my humble abode. Try not to break anything." She bit back a retort, sensing his sarcasm. "I'll do my best." Daniel's eyes lingered on her momentarily before he shrugged and walked away. Linda exhaled, unsure whether to feel relieved or annoyed. Something about his presence unsettled her, but she quickly brushed it off and returned to her work. Linda's encounters with Daniel grew more frequent as she settled into her role. Despite his wealth and charm, she couldn't shake the impression that he carried an air of loneliness. His comments, often laced with sarcasm, seemed designed to provoke rather than connect. One afternoon, Linda was cleaning the massive living room when she heard Daniel's voice behind her. "Do you always hum while you clean? Or is today special?" Startled, she turned to see him leaning casually against the doorway, a glass of something amber-colored in his hand. His suit jacket was slung over his shoulder, and his tie hung loose around his neck. "I didn't realize I was humming," Linda replied, clutching the dusting cloth tightly. "I'll stop if it bothers you." Daniel chuckled, stepping further into the room. No. By all means, continue. It's quaint. Though I must say, your choice of music is interesting. Folk songs, if I'm not mistaken." Linda hesitated, unsure whether he was mocking her. "It's something my mother used to sing," she said, keeping her tone neutral. Daniel's playful smirk softened momentarily, replaced by something almost wistful. "Your mother must have had good taste," he murmured, almost to himself, before adding more loudly, "but do try not to let it distract you from the antiques. Some of them are older than you, and certainly more valuable." Linda bit back a sharp retort, instead offering a polite nod. "I'll be careful." Their exchanges followed a similar pattern over the next few weeks. Daniel would appear unexpectedly, often during breaks or while she worked, and engage her in conversations that teetered between teasing and genuine curiosity. Despite his arrogance, Linda began to catch glimpses of vulnerability in his words, moments where his defenses seemed to slip. Ethan, on the other hand, quickly bonded with Daniel. The boy's natural curiosity and confidence seemed to amuse the wealthy homeowner, and the two often chatted in the garden or while Ethan helped the gardener. Linda found herself observing their interactions with a mix of relief and unease. "He's not as bad as you think, Mom," Ethan said one evening as they ate dinner in their staff quarters. "I think he's just lonely." Linda scoffed lightly. "Lonely? With a house like this and all the money in the world?" "I doubt it." Ethan shrugged. "Money doesn't mean you're happy. His words lingered in Linda's mind long after their conversation ended. During one of Daniel's rare moments of openness, Linda began to see him in a new light. The estate had been bustling all day with preparations for a charity event Daniel was hosting, and Linda had been on her feet since sunrise. When the guests arrived, she was exhausted but determined to remain professional. She was tidying up the main hall when she overheard Daniel speaking with one of his guests in the adjacent room. "I'm not doing this for recognition," Daniel said, his tone unusually serious. "The proceeds will go directly to funding educational programs for underprivileged kids. If even one child gets a chance at a better life because of this, it's worth it." Linda paused, surprised. This was a side of Daniel she hadn't seen before, a man driven by purpose rather than arrogance. Later that evening, as the event wound, Linda found herself alone with Daniel in the dimly lit garden. He was sitting on a bench, gazing at the stars, his earlier energy replaced by quiet introspection. "You surprised me today," Linda said softly, approaching cautiously. Daniel glanced at her, one brow arching. "Did I? How so?" Linda hesitated, unsure whether to continue. "I overheard what you said about the charity. I didn't expect someone like you to care so deeply." Daniel laughed, a low, bitter sound. "Someone like me? Let me guess. Arrogant, wealthy, out of touch with the real world." Linda flushed. "I didn't mean it like that. It's just, you don't make it easy for people to see the good in you." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I suppose that's fair. But believe it or not, I wasn't always like this." His voice softened, tinged with regret. "Life can harden you, especially when you lose the people who matter most." Linda sat down beside him, the cool night air wrapping around them. "Everyone has their struggles," she said quietly, "but it's what you do with them that counts." Daniel turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You're full of surprises, Linda. Maybe I misjudged you." They sat in silence for a while, the distant hum of the party fading into the background. For the first time, Linda felt she was beginning to understand the man behind the wealth and sarcasm. The invitation to Daniel's birthday party came as a surprise. Linda had just finished dusting the bookshelves in the library when Ethan burst in, waving a crisp, cream-colored envelope. "Mom, we're invited to Mr. Daniel's birthday party," he exclaimed, his eyes alight with excitement. Linda frowned, taking the envelope from him. Inside was a formal invitation with gilded lettering that detailed the event's date and venue, a luxurious five-star restaurant in the city. "I don't understand," Linda muttered. "Why would he invite us? We're just staff." "Maybe he sees us as more than that," Ethan suggested, shrugging. "And besides, it's a great opportunity, Mom. You can dress up and have fun. You deserve it." Linda's instinct was to decline. She wasn't comfortable mingling with the wealthy and sophisticated crowd Daniel undoubtedly surrounded himself with. But Ethan's enthusiasm and Daniel's insistence, delivered through Emily, who informed her it was a paid day off, left her with little choice. The day of the party arrived quickly. Emily helped Linda with her hair and makeup, and Ethan presented her with a sleek black dress and matching shoes, rented with his own money. Linda barely recognized the woman staring back when she saw herself in the mirror. For the first time in years, she felt beautiful. "You look amazing, Mom," Ethan said with a grin as they climbed into the car Daniel had sent for them. The restaurant was breathtaking, all glass and gold with chandeliers that sparkled like constellations. Linda felt nervous as they entered, her hand gripping Ethan's arm tightly. The room was filled with elegantly dressed guests, the air buzzing with laughter and conversation. The room shifted when Daniel appeared, dressed in a tailored suit and exuding charisma. He greeted his guests warmly, his eyes lingering on Linda and Ethan when he reached them. "I'm glad you came," he said, his tone softer than usual. "Ethan, you look sharp." And Linda, his gaze swept over her, and for the first time, she thought she saw genuine admiration in his eyes. "You clean up well." "Thank you," Linda replied, trying to suppress her blush. Ainda remained in the background as the evening progressed, content to observe. The speeches began, and each guest took the stage to share anecdotes about Daniel. The stories painted a picture of a man who, despite his flaws, had a generous heart and a deep sense of responsibility. When Ethan nudged her and handed her a guitar, Linda froze. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "You'll regret it if you don't," he whispered. "You've got this, Mom." With her heart pounding, Linda made her way to the stage. The room fell silent as she adjusted the microphone. She introduced herself briefly, explaining that she had only recently come to know Daniel and had no long-winded stories to share. Instead, she offered a song, one her mother had loved and passed down to her. Linda forgot her nervousness as her fingers strummed the guitar, and her voice filled the room. The melody was simple yet haunting, a tribute to resilience and love. When the final chord faded, the room erupted into applause, and Daniel, standing at the back, looked visibly moved. The days following the party were quiet, but something had shifted between Linda and Daniel. He seemed more approachable, his sarcastic remarks replaced with genuine curiosity about her life. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden, Daniel asked her about the song she had performed. "It was my mother's favorite," Linda explained, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "She used to sing it to me when I was little." Daniel leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "It sounded familiar," he said. "I think I've heard it before." Linda frowned. "That's impossible. My mother composed it." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Maybe I'm mistaken," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. A week later, Daniel approached her again, this time looking troubled. "There's something I need to ask you," he began. "Do you know much about your family history?" Linda hesitated, unsure of where this was leading. "Not much," she admitted. "My parents died when I was young. My grandfather raised me." Daniel nodded, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "And your brother? What happened to him?" The question hit Linda like a blow. "How do you know about Marcus?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel looked away, his jaw tightening. "Because I think I am Marcus." The air seemed to leave the room. Linda stared at him, her mind racing. It was impossible. Marcus had died as a baby. But as Daniel recounted a childhood memory, a woman singing the same song to him while another man looked on, claiming to be his parents, Linda felt a chill run down her spine. "I don't know for certain," Daniel said, his voice raw, "but the details they match. And if it's true, it would explain so much." Linda didn't know what to say. The idea was too overwhelming, too surreal. "We need to talk to Grandpa Robert," she said finally. "He's the only one who might have answers." The visit to the nursing home was emotional. Grandpa Robert was frail, his mind clouded by dementia, but when Linda mentioned Marcus, something shifted. His eyes, usually distant, sharpened with clarity. "Marcus," he murmured, reaching for Daniel's hand. "You've come home." Tears filled Linda's eyes as she watched Daniel's stoic facade crumble. For the first time, she saw him not as the wealthy and enigmatic homeowner, but as the little brother she had thought she had lost forever. The days following their visit to Grandpa Robert were a whirlwind of emotions. Despite his fragile health, the older man had provided enough clarity to confirm what Linda and Daniel already suspected. Daniel was Marcus, the brother Linda had thought she'd lost. Daniel, now grappling with the truth of his identity, insisted on taking Grandpa Robert out of the nursing home and bringing him to live on the estate. "He's family," Daniel said firmly when Linda hesitated. "He belongs here with us." It wasn't long before Linda and Ethan moved out of their modest staff quarters into a spacious estate wing. The adjustment was initially overwhelming. Linda had spent her life in practical, modest surroundings, and the estate's luxury felt almost alien. But Daniel, Marcus, as she was beginning to call him, was insistent. "This is your home now," he said. "It's where you should have been all along." The change brought a renewed sense of purpose for Grandpa Robert. Under Daniel's care, with top-notch doctors and a steady stream of affection from his family, he began to have more frequent moments of clarity. He took to sitting in the sunny garden, his once vacant eyes now brimming with recognition and warmth as he watched Linda, Daniel, and Ethan together. One afternoon, Linda found Daniel sitting by Grandpa's side, deep in conversation. She paused, listening from a distance. "You've done well, Marcus," Grandpa said, his voice frail but steady. "Your mother would be proud." Daniel looked down, his expression a mix of pride and sorrow. I wish she could see this, he murmured. I wish she'd told me the truth sooner. She had her reasons, Grandpa replied gently. But what matters now is that you've found your way back. Linda stepped forward, tears in her eyes. And we found you, she added, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder. The three of them sat together in the garden as the sun dipped below the horizon, their shared history weaving them into a tighter bond than ever before. With her family reuniting and her estate responsibilities lightening, Linda began to think about her future. The realization that Daniel, Marcus, had given her and Ethan's stability was a relief, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to do more. During one of these reflective moments, Daniel approached her with a surprising proposal. There's someone I want you to meet, he said, handing her a neatly printed folder. James Wright. He's an entrepreneur looking to revive the meat processing plant brand you used to work for. Linda blinked in surprise. Why would he want to talk to me? Because you spent over a decade there, Daniel said simply. You know the products inside and out. He needs someone with experience, someone he can trust. I told him you were the perfect candidate. Linda opened the folder, scanning the details of the offer. James Wright was proposing a consultancy role, a chance to help rebuild the brand she had been part of for many years. The opportunity was exciting but daunting. I don't know, Marcus, she said hesitantly. This is a lot to take on. Daniel smiled. You've faced bigger challenges, Linda. And besides, you've got me and Ethan cheering you on. The meeting with James Wright was both nerve-wracking and exhilarating. Wright, a sharp, charismatic businessman in his early 50s, greeted Linda warmly and wasted no time outlining his vision for the brand. We're not just bringing back the same products, he explained. We're modernizing them, expanding into new markets. But we want to keep the heart of what made them successful in the first place. That's where you come in. Linda listened, her mind racing with possibilities. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of excitement about her career. By the end of the meeting, she had agreed to join Wright's team. The new role brought challenges, but Linda thrived. She traveled between the new factory site and her hometown, working closely with Wright and his team to develop products and oversee production. Her experience and dedication quickly earned her respect, and she embraced a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Back at the estate, Ethan flourished in his new school, and Grandpa Robert enjoyed his improved health. Daniel, meanwhile, threw himself into his creative projects, inspired by the strength and resilience of his newfound family. Summer transitioned into autumn, and Ethan settled into life at his new school. The prestigious institution provided opportunities far beyond what their small-town public school had offered. Though Linda initially worried about him adapting, Ethan thrived. His natural curiosity and charm quickly won over his peers and teachers. One Friday evening, Ethan called Linda from his dorm room. His voice carried the excitement of someone who had discovered a new purpose. Mom, I joined the debate club, he announced. Our first competition is next month. And guess what? We're discussing community revitalization, like what you're doing with the meat processing plant. Linda smiled, a mix of pride and nostalgia filling her. That's wonderful, Ethan. I'm so proud of you. Thanks, Mom, he said, his voice softening. I couldn't have done any of this without you. And Uncle Marcus. He's been incredible. Linda glanced out the window, where Marcus was walking in the garden with Grandpa Robert. He has been, she agreed. But don't forget to give yourself credit. You've worked hard to get here. Despite Ethan's growing independence, he remained deeply connected to his family. On weekends, when he visited the estate, he spent hours helping Grandpa Robert with small tasks, reading and listening to his stories. Grandpa Robert, in turn, often referred to Ethan as the future of the family. One evening, Ethan shared a bold idea as they sat around the dinner table. What if, once I graduate, I help with the plant expansion? He asked, his tone serious. I've been learning about business management and logistics at school. I could bring a fresh perspective. Linda and Marcus exchanged a glance, both surprised and impressed. That's ambitious, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. But if anyone can pull it off, it's you. Ethan beamed. He saw a clear path forward for the first time, a future where he could contribute to the family's growing legacy. As the months passed, The bonds within the family deepened. Grandpa Robert continued to experience moments of clarity thanks to the excellent care he received. One crisp autumn morning, he sat in the garden with Marcus and Linda, a blanket draped over his lap. "You know," he began, his voice steady and clear, "seeing you two together, it's like seeing your parents again. They'd be so proud of what you've become." Linda squeezed her grandfather's hand, her heart swelling with gratitude. Marcus nodded, his usual composure softening. "I just wish I'd had more time with them," he said quietly. "You have us now," Linda replied, "and that's what matters." The family gathered in the dining room for a celebratory meal that evening. Marcus had invited James Wright, who had just closed a deal to expand the meat processing plant's reach to neighboring states. The table was filled with laughter and clinking glasses, the air buzzing with a sense of accomplishment and togetherness. Marcus stood and tapped his glass during dessert, drawing everyone's attention. "I'd like to make a toast," he began. "To the family, the one we're born into, the one we find, and the one we choose. Life has a way of surprising us, of leading us down paths we never expected. But at the end of the day, the people at this table make it all worthwhile." He raised his glass, and everyone followed suit, their faces lit with smiles. Later that night, Linda found Marcus gazing at the stars in the garden. She joined him, the cool air wrapping around them. "You've done so much for us," she said softly. "For Grandpa, for Ethan, for me. I don't know how to thank you." Marcus turned to her, his expression earnest. "You don't need to thank me, Linda. You're my sister. This is where I'm meant to be, where we're meant to be." Linda nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. For the first time in years, she felt like her life had found its balance. Her family was whole, her career was fulfilling, and the future, though uncertain, felt bright. As the family settled into their newfound rhythm, Linda reflected on how far they had come. Her new meat processing plant revitalization project role was challenging and rewarding. James Wright often commended her for her meticulous knowledge of the products and ability to bridge the gap between old traditions and modern demands. One afternoon, while reviewing packaging designs, Linda received a call from an old friend from her factory days. Clara, once her closest colleague, now worked in a neighboring town and had heard about Linda's new role. "Linda," Clara said warmly, "I'm so proud of you. But I have to ask, how did you do it? How did you rebuild your life after everything fell apart?" Linda paused, her mind flashing back to the days of uncertainty, struggle, and resilience. "I didn't do it alone," she said finally. "My family gave me the strength I needed to take risks, to believe that things could get better." The call left Linda reflecting on the importance of the people who had supported her journey. Marcus, Ethan, and even Grandpa Robert, whose unwavering presence reminded her of her roots. That weekend, Linda visited her hometown with Ethan. They walked through the streets that had once felt so familiar, now tinged with nostalgia and hope. When they passed the old factory, Ethan stopped and stared at the boarded-up windows. "Mom," he said, his voice thoughtful, "this place, it's where everything started, isn't it?" Linda nodded. "Yes, it was where I worked for years, where I struggled, learned, and grew. And now, it's a reminder of what's possible when you don't give up." The visit reinvigorated Linda's commitment to her work. She poured her energy into the plant's relaunch, finding joy in mentoring new employees and seeing the first products roll off the line. The plant became a symbol of revival for Linda and the entire community. The family faced one of its most bittersweet moments. As winter settled in, Grandpa Robert, whose health had steadily declined, passed away peacefully in his sleep. The loss was profound, but the family found solace in knowing he had spent his final months surrounded by love. At the funeral, Marcus gave a heartfelt eulogy. "Grandpa Robert was the glue that held us together," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "He reminded us of who we are and where we come from. His strength and wisdom will live on in each of us." After the funeral, the family gathered in the estate's garden, where Grandpa Robert had spent many cherished moments. Ethan, standing between Linda and Marcus, spoke up. "Grandpa always said we were his legacy," he said, looking at his mother and uncle. I think it's up to us to honor that. In the following months, the family worked to carry on Grandpa Robert's spirit. Ethan threw himself into his studies, with dreams of one day expanding the plant's business into international markets. Linda continued to thrive in her role, mentoring employees and creating job opportunities for families in their hometown. Inspired by the family's journey, Marcus directed a short film based on their story. It was met with critical acclaim, praised for its emotional depth and celebration of resilience. On the first anniversary of Grandpa Robert's passing, the family held a small gathering in the garden. Marcus unveiled a plaque dedicated to their grandfather, inscribed with his favorite saying, "Family is the foundation of every great journey." Linda felt a profound sense of peace as they stood together, the winter sun casting a warm glow over them. Life had been unpredictable, full of challenges and losses, but it also brought incredible love, resilience, and renewal. "We've come a long way," Marcus said, touching Linda's shoulder. "And we still have so much more to do." Linda nodded, her gaze shifting to Ethan, whose bright eyes were filled with determination. "Together," she said. "We'll do it together."